Global Shapers community is the first truly global youth network that's focused on improving the state of the world.
It's a global community of youth between the ages of 20 and 30 who feel involved in the cities that they live in and care about the cities that they live in and want to have a positive impact.
Our role is to be able to try and accelerate some of the great initiatives that are being discussed and hopefully implemented through the WEF organization. You know, I think we're the voice of the young.
It's such an illustrious crowd of dynamic people, and it's great because when we sit on the same platform, we have so much to share with each other.
It's just an incredibly diverse, innovative, extraordinary group of people who are working really hard in their personal lives to make a change around a particular cause, and it brings them together.
Global Shapers primarily meet in their local hubs, but then they also are connected through a global platform to interact and exchange with other global shapers around the world.
I think what's been really interesting about the way WEF has done it is by creating a hub-based model. We live in, I guess you could call it a borderless world at this point. I mean, globalization's made it so that people are just so connected all over the world. So you could have somebody in the Washington, D.C. hub who's doing something or project or collaborate with somebody who's in the hub in the Middle East and might directly tie into what they're doing. So I think that's really powerful about it, is that you just have this ability to interact and transact with somebody halfway across the world and connect right away.
We really want to address some of the world's problems, and we might not have all of the resources out there or all the experience, but I know that we have the energy.
The Global Shapers community is the first.
Albert Einstein once said, "Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it.
Proceed.
Exhibit A. Here's a modern day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today, and here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today, and here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now, ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A letter which determines product quality, hence grade A of meat. I get it. Back then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed, and now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same, and every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap.
Watch your language.
Sorry, Your Honor, but if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results will be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens, this educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant should not be acquitted. This may be one of the worst criminal offenses ever to be committed. And let's mention the way you treat your employees.
Objection. Overruled. I want to hear this.
It's a shame. I mean, teachers have the most important job on the planet, yet they're underpaid? No wonder so many students are short-changed. Let's be honest, teachers should earn just as much as doctors, because a doctor can do heart surgery and save the life of a kid, but a great teacher can reach the heart of that kid and allow him to truly live. See, teachers are heroes that often get blamed, but they're not the problem. They work in a system without many options or rights. Curriculums are created by policymakers, most of which have never taught a day in their life. Just obsessed with standardized tests. They think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we continue down this road, the results will be lethal. I don't have much faith in school, but I do have faith in people. And if we can customize healthcare, cars, and Facebook pages, then it is our duty to do the same for education, to upgrade it, change it, do away with school spirit, because that's useless. Unless we're working to bring the spirit out of each and every student, that should be our task. No more Common Core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gift an equal chance. I know this sounds like a dream, but countries like Finland are doing impressive things. They have shorter school days. Teachers make a decent wage. Homework is non-existent, and they focus on collaboration instead of competition. But here's the kicker, boys and girls. Their educational system outperforms every other country in the world. Other places like Singapore are succeeding rapidly. Schools like Montessori, programs like Khan Academy, there is no single solution. But let's get moving, because while students may be 20% of our population, they are 100% of our future. So let's attend to their dreams, and there's no telling what we can achieve. This is a world in which I believe. A world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I'll rest my case.
You are live. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second session of Global Talks, a year-long series where we bring to you some of the most influential people in our world today. The Global Shapers Panjim Hub, in collaboration with the Lagos Hub in Nigeria, are thrilled to bring to you the second speaker of our series, Ms. Wanjuhi Njoroge. Wanjuhi is the founder and president of the Nelly Group of Companies, as well as the founder of Root Ed, an organization that seeks to transform the education in rural and remote parts of Africa. Wanjuhi is the founder also of the People Planet Africa, an enterprise involved in people-centered forest protection and restoration, sustainability and inclusive development that incorporates rural communities which constitute 70% of Africa's population. She also sits on the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers Foundation Board, the UNDP Kenya Youth Sounding Board. She has gained extensive experience working with rural communities and assisting government agencies and organizations incorporate sustainability into their businesses, thus increasing their positive impact and profit. She ran one of the biggest campaigns in 2018, dubbed Save Our Forests KE, which led to a total ban on forest harvesting and policy change. Wow! She has also helped set up 2 ICT centers and a library worth 10,000 rupees in these rural areas, which have greatly improved education and exposure for children who didn't previously go beyond primary school. In communities who have never seen computers before, Wanjuhi was invited by Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, along with Greta Thunberg, to offer key insights on grassroots mobilization for young and a bottom-up approach in fighting for a cause at the open panel of the Climate Summit held at New York, the United Nations General Assembly 2019. I am amazed, I am honored, and I am beyond thrilled to have you with us here today, Wanjuhi. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Who is that? That's not me. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm honored. Thank you.
From what I've interacted with Wanjuhi before this talk, she is over all of this, she is one of the most humble people I've had the privilege of meeting, and she is very young. So to achieve so much at such a young age, wow. So let's start. My first question, and this is the most important question, Wanjuhi, what inspired you to take up social work, particularly in the field of education? Tell us your journey.
Thank you very much. Fun fact is that I was born and brought up in the rural areas. That is when you read my profile, you see there's a lot of work that I do in the rural areas. I was born in a small village at the foot of Mount Kenya, the most beautiful place, I think, in the world, because we are deep inside the forest. And the only reason you're hosting me today is because I gained an education. When I went to high school, I was a very shy and timid girl. But then the teachers saw something in me. They saw a leadership trait, and they made me the deputy head girl in Form 2. And then they made me the head girl in Form 3. So that really boosted my confidence, and it also helped me improve in my performance. I remember moving to top 10, and I never left top 10 after that. And so I wanted to go back to my former high school and just give back, because this is the school that spotted the leadership trait in me and brought it out. But when I went there were about, I think, 7 cases of teenage pregnancies. One of the girls was operated on, delivered a baby before, and it was through cesarean section, days before the national examination. Another one got a very good grade, and instead of proceeding to university, she got married. It was very, very painful for me, because I would see the potential that these girls have, but they don't even realize it. The minute they get a baby, that becomes the end of them. And so we convened a parents' meeting with the school. And when I met the parents would stand up and say, you know, my children have gone to high school. I never got to high school. That's a huge achievement. And I realized there was such a big disconnect. And if we were to save these girls, we needed to start early. And that led me to starting projects, targeting primary schools, the communities, and also the teachers in those schools. So my story is of a girl who was shy, who was born in the village, but thanks to education and thanks to my teachers believing in me, I was able to rise and become the person that I am today. Yeah.
Lovely, beautiful. Thank you. That was a really inspirational story. So I might have made a small error when I began. I was supposed to begin this session by saying, Habari yako, Wanjuhi? This is my For those of you who don't know, Habari yako in Wanjuhi's language, Swahili, means, hi, how are you? Am I correct?
Yes, you are. That's the national language.
Yeah, Swahili. So that was taught to me by my father, who grew up in Africa. He loves that place. Let's move on to the second question. Now, I'm not going to talk about how education has been affected by this pandemic, because we can see it all around us. We all know. Teachers are training to use the latest technology, but students also, many of them are unable to access this technology. So it appears that we are floundering in the dark. In this unprecedented situation, we are figuratively grasping at straws, at anything that might help us stay afloat, Yet, even after all this, according to the UN, close to 1.6 billion children and youth were out of school because of this pandemic. And we've even had worst case scenarios of students taking their own lives in frustration. So, Wanjuhi, my question to you is our current path of action working, or should we do something else?
Certainly not. In fact, every time people say we need to build back better, I'm like, building back to, we need to build forward better. And allow me to paint a picture for you. Usually we have about 42% cases of school dropout in Africa, which is the highest anywhere in the world. Now, thanks to the pandemic, we're talking about cases, teenage pregnancy cases, for instance, in Kenya. I think the statistics in Kenya are crazy. Maybe 156,000 per month per month this year alone. We are talking about these young boys joining crime. We're talking about them engaging in drugs. So things are bleak, but I always believe that any crisis gives us an opportunity to audit ourselves and to look at ourselves and say, we have done well here, but here and here and here we are not doing well. And we need to come together and find a lasting solution. And one of the things that we must do is address the policy gap that exists. I know Asia is struggling with that. Some parts of Asia are struggling with that. And in Africa, we are really, really struggling with this. And so what do we need to do? And I feel every time I speak to young people, I remind them that we have the power of numbers. And if we came together, because we know we have seen the world, we've seen the world and what the world can give us thanks to having, for instance, mobile phones. Why are we not demanding better? Why are we allowing our governments to take us for a ride and throw chicken feed at us? Yes, they just want to fatten us for slaughter. Okay, so we have the power to demand better, and we must demand better. We must not be gullible to these politicians. We pay them by the taxes that we pay, and so we demand better, and it's time we started demanding better. But then there's also a responsibility that networks like Global Shapers have to play. You are privileged, or we are privileged, in that we have a network that gives us exposure to what a better world looks like. So our work, it's okay to have privilege. What is not okay is to do nothing without privilege. Our work is to now take what the world is doing, the rest of the world is doing, for instance, when you think of the fourth industrial revolution, and expose our communities to this so that they can be able to demand that. Secondly, you find that we have such rich networks. We have access to even the president or the prime minister. Why are we not organizing discourses, and especially now that we are talking about the Davos Lab, why are we not organizing conversations around the issues that are affecting us with young people, not ourselves as global shapers, but with other young people in our community, and also bringing the leaders responsible, and let's have a conversation together. Let's create that platform. Let's convene and let's start having honest conversations about what is ailing our society and how can we make it better as well. That is how global shapers are going to play a part in building forward better.
Absolutely. So regarding the youth who have not had the privilege of being a global shaper, how do you think they can help at the policy level? That's a daunting task, because in India, we have the recent national education. We're still waiting to see how that will affect us. But in India, the problem is if anyone is not happy, we protest, we have marches, we have morchas. Is that the right way to do things, or is there another way that the youth can approach those higher ups who actually have the power to change the policies?
So, and that's a very, very good question, and I'm grateful that you've asked me, because I have been on both sides of the divide. I have run, and you read correctly, I ran the Save Our Forest KE campaign in 2018, which pushed the government into imposing a ban. And we need that. We need people on the streets putting pressure on government, but we also need other people who are saying this is how to do it. Okay? Because once we continue putting pressure, just putting pressure, and nobody is saying how do we navigate. And when you think about the pandemic, it's new to everybody. Nobody knows how we're supposed to navigate. But that doesn't mean that we become soft on government. We need to continue putting pressure on the streets. And once we put pressure on the street, there's another part. There's another group of people that now is talking about the how, those that have access to the policy formulation. The other thing that I want to say is that can global shapers, for instance, and other such networks, look at the new policies that governments are formulating, break them down, host conversations, educating the citizenry on what is involved, what do these policy documents involve? And you find at times the policy document is not even very big. How many hubs are there in India? I know there are many hubs in India. How many lawyers? How many people who understand policy are there? Can we collaborate and start talking about these policy documents and educating the masses? That's how you'll be able to see here there's a problem, this works, but this has a problem. And if we change it, we're going to make it better. And that way, hubs and global shapers are creating relevance for themselves. You become the to-go-to person in terms of youth, in terms of policy formulation, in terms of dealing with crisis as well. And the Davos Labs, or what we're calling the Great Reset conversations, have created us, have given us an opportunity to host intergenerational conversations. We must not be gullible, but we must educate the masses by telling them the truth. So yes, we need to put pressure on the streets, we need to host demonstrations, but we also need to talk about what is the problem and how can we solve it.
Practical solutions. So we need educated people who know XYZ is happening, so ABC can be done, not just screaming on the streets. Good. So in continuation to what I mentioned earlier, now as of today, millions in the world have little or no access to any means of formal education. On the other hand, because of COVID and the lockdown, institutes all over the world, they have been churning out online portals, classes, seminars, webinars, which a lot of students have been attending. Now, from my point of view, this is creating an enormous gap in the educated versus the uneducated. How do you feel this will impact our society in the next 10 to 20 years?
Allow me to start this with an example. Nelly's group of companies does a lot of impact reporting, which means this is videography. We go to projects and we want to report the impact after the project was implemented. And my lead videographer has never been to a school to study videography. He learned how to edit and shoot videos in his local church. But when you see the quality of work that guy does, it's second to none. So what am I alluding to? I don't think degrees matter anymore, especially when it comes to technical work. So we need to rethink education. And unless we rethink education, I don't think universities have any future. Why should I spend 5 years learning something that I will go to YouTube, learn, and start earning money? You get? But when it comes to managerial skills, those probably will still need a degree. I'm not dismissing higher education. It's still extremely important. But what I'm questioning is the practicality of this university education. And it's extremely important that institutions of higher learning, and we have commissions that are meant to monitor, regulate, and guide. And again, we go back to policy. We need, and I don't know about Asia, but in Africa, we have such a huge disconnect between the product that is the students in the university and the end market. You know, the producer, who are the universities or other institutions of higher learning, and also the market, which is the end user. There is such a disconnect. There's a time I hired somebody from the university and they could not draft a sensible email. This is a PR student. And I was like, what are you being taught in school? So anytime I'm recruiting, I know at the back of my mind, I'll have to spend money and time, you know, readying this person to work for me. So there's a lot of disconnect, and soon and very soon, these university degrees will be useless. Why should I spend 4 years learning something that my church can teach me? You get, but they need to, and this is part of society. And again, I go back to also we young people. We are in the job market. When we get into the job market, can we host? Any problem is such a huge opportunity to create impact, to create relevance, to showcase what we as young people are capable of doing. We want to acquire seats on the table, but we need to earn these seats. We want to continue. We want to have a chance to influence policy, for instance, but we need to lead. We need to show the world that this is what we are capable of doing. So again, I go back to saying, yes, there's a problem. There's a huge disconnect between what institutions of higher learning are producing versus what we are consuming as consumers. But there is a huge opportunity of now bringing the linkage, looking at what is working and what is not working. They're still offering useless universities. Soon, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. My biggest worry is whether the children in the rural areas are going to be making robots. Are they utilizing virtual reality? You get, and that's a future.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, in India, with the new NEP, this is one of the issues that it wants to tackle, the gap between students who graduate versus what the market needs. Because even here, majority of the companies spend a minimum of 6 months training the new employee. Why is that necessary?
Yep.
If they've done 5 years? You're absolutely right. So let's focus on this little silver lining that we see in the middle of this whole pandemic era. There are a lot of people who have sprouted up now in response to the pandemic, and they have done quite a lot of good work in bringing education to the marginalized and usually inaccessible students. Are these people part of the great reset that we really need?
Yes, I would say yes, but before I say yes, I am worried because when you look at the internet penetration in Africa, for instance, we're talking about 39% compared to Europe, which is 80-something%. North America, we're talking about 90-something%. And so I'm worried about the digital divide and what this can do. I have done ICT literacy classes in the rural areas, and I even have photos of kids struggling to open the lid of a laptop. You know, the pandemic has shown us that there can be major disruptions. Look at the kids dropping out of school, but because these kids are dropping out of school, they are getting pregnant because they have nothing to do. They have no laptop. This parent earns barely $1 a day. She or he is supposed to feed the children. She has more than one child, maybe 3 or 4 children, at times even 6. Are they going to invest in a laptop or a smartphone, or are they going to invest in food? So ICT, internet connectivity, needs to become a human right. Because the world we are going into, you will not thrive, you will not survive without internet connectivity. And so these courses will only make sense. These courses that are these short courses on skills and stuff like that are being given out will only make sense if we have internet connectivity. We cannot continue leaving people behind more than they have been left behind. The UN is calling the next decade the decade of action, and we really must put our mouth where our money is. So if we really want to uplift the livelihood, like Africa has 70% of the people in the rural areas. I go to my village and I struggle with not internet connectivity, but even network coverage. When I want to switch off from the world, I just go to the village and I will not have network. I will have to put my phone at a certain spot to get network. My mother has 3 phones, and there are days I can't even get her on the 3 phones because there's no network coverage. So these are things that need to become human rights, a human right. I believe internet connectivity needs to become a human right. That's a bare minimum. That way, then we can say even these dropouts, when they're leaving primary school, for instance, they have a skill they can use to earn a living. We're talking of high rates of unemployment. But this is something that we can solve. Why are we still teaching introduction to computers at the university level? And I'm talking about Africa. Why not teach a coding language, for instance, and this child leaves school with a coding language that they can use to earn a living, even making simple websites, you know? So these are some of the things that we must address if this kind of model of learning is going to happen, because this is not the last disruption we're going to have in our lifetime.
So that actually brings me to another question I had in mind. You see, one of the adaptive measures because of this pandemic is that there's a lot of focus on teacher training, teacher education, both for present and future teachers. Now, do you feel this is the need of the hour today, or like you said, should we be investing in infrastructure, novel technology, and how do you look at this trend? Is it going to change once we come out of COVID? Because you spoke about infrastructure and technology needed.
So when you look at the teacher ratio, for instance, I'm not very sure of how India is, but in Africa it's crazy. You find that one teacher maybe is handling 60 students.
Whoa.
This can be addressed when we have proper infrastructure in place, yes? But then when we have infrastructure and non-skilled teachers, it's useless because who is going to train? So it needs to happen together and concurrently. And it would be unfair to say that government should be doing that alone. I think this is where public-private partnerships come into play. This is where, for instance, government gives tax holidays for people who are, for instance, laying certain infrastructure. They get tax breaks. So the two, it's a case of chicken and egg. So the two are equally important. And I'm happy that at least India is investing in reskilling the teachers. I know here they're also doing it, just that it's not the current stuff. It is the outdated stuff, but we are still celebrating the small steps. We will catch up. At least they're doing something, but it will be useless if a teacher will still have to deal with 60 students. But imagine if it's a teacher, a student has a laptop and access to internet, the teacher is teaching from the house and the students are doing this practically, then it makes a lot of sense. So the two of them are extremely important, yes.
Two of them extremely important, absolutely correct, interesting. Okay, now when we talk about education, and you actually tried to define education at the beginning of this talk, education has been defined by so many people since the beginning of the world. Today, we have so many different forms of education all over the world, in addition to the classroom method. A lot of schools don't have classrooms, they have the Montessori and so many other which focus on a different path. So what do you foresee as the system of the future? And to give an example, let me point out, 2 years back, I had read that the University of Yale has gone into teacherless education, which is what you said. I don't need to sit in a university. I can learn on YouTube. So education system of the future.
So, and that's a very good question, because we had something we call the 8-4-4 system. So you spend 8 years in primary school. In fact, it's more, because you start at nursery and then you do 8 years in primary school, 4 years in high school, 4 years in university, other than for engineering and medicine. But today there are things I took in school that were totally useless. I am not an artistic person. I don't know why I did arts and crafts. Because I cannot draw to save my life. And that's the truth. That's my truth. And so the future, and the children, that every generation is very different. I find that my generation and the ones that are coming after mine are very restless. They are questioning things, so they are not going to waste a lot of time doing things that are not making sense. And I like the Montessori system that allows you to discover yourself, to discover what you're good at. And that's what we need to invest in, because I don't see why we waste so much time, and we spend so much time. I remember cramming so much, and today I do not even use those things that I learned in school. They were totally useless. I wasted my precious time. I could have finished school maybe at 17, 16 and gotten into the job market or started my own business, created employment. And so relevant, these are some of the conversations that I want to challenge Global Shapers and other networks like Global Shapers that bring brilliant young people together, that we need to start having this conversation on what is the gap and how do we fill it, creating platform, convening the stakeholders to come together and let's just have an honest conversation. Of course, there are suppliers who want to continue supplying, but I believe that when we come together, we will still see benefits, and we reap more benefits as opposed to people wanting to hold on or to archaic ways that benefit nobody. Yeah.
Absolutely. You've given us so much of information, so many examples, and I'm really intrigued by all that you have to say. I'm already getting comments like, wow, I love the way she speaks, and people are admiring you, Wanjuhi. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the most popular questions that I like to ask our speakers is, what are the challenges that you face and how do you overcome them in this line of work?
Very good question, and I want to be very honest. I don't want to give you a PR answer.
Please do. Please.
A good example is a place we were doing a library, and so I'll give two examples. So once, let me start with the Save Our Forest KE campaign because it did something to my heart. I don't think I've recovered from it. It exposed me to the reality and the role that's in government, and I don't think I have recovered from it. So you give so much of yourself to society, but then, for instance, government imposed a ban on forest harvesting, but when it imposed that ban on forest harvesting, you find that the community then comes back to me and says, you have taken away our only source of livelihood. You know, you expect them to celebrate that you're saving their forest, but they come back to you and say, you have taken away our only source of income. And of course, that can be very disheartening. Another example is we were setting an ICT center, and I remember the sponsor or the person who gave us the money did not give us cash. So they have their list of suppliers, and they use their list of suppliers. So they didn't give us cash. So the community or the people who are in charge never got to get money, and they would have wanted to benefit, you know, from the money. And it was very interesting working on that project because I had to beg, I had to constantly talk to them, I had to constantly reassure them, remind them of the major goal, because this is going to improve your society, your community, your children are going to benefit. I think that has been the lowest point. But the lowest of lows will be seeing a government that truly doesn't care, doesn't have the interest of people at heart. Nothing breaks my heart like that. And we must truly think of leadership. We need, as young people, I know it's not an easy thing, but we need to take up public leadership. We need to have in public service because we need people who have the heart. Imagine people who have been beaten, hit hard by COVID-19. They would expect the government to reassure them. They would want to look at government as a source of hope that is going to get better, but all they see from government is greed. You know, that breaks my heart when I look at policy, because I believe a lot in policy. Policy is what is going to protect you from greedy people. Policy guarantees that even if you have a mad person leading the government, you're sure that you're safe because you can always fall back on the constitution, fall back on the country's law, which are supreme. But then when you review policy and you realize that the person who was heading a certain committee in parliament in a timber mill, for instance, and they left a lot of loopholes that they are now exploiting to mutilate the forest. And then a president went and signed, appended his signature, and you ask yourself very, very hard questions. You know, you have to be very naive to believe that you can change the world. And when you see these things, your little bubble is busted, and it's a very painful experience. So I would say those have been my lows. But then when you see that you're impacting children who could not open the lid of their laptops, children who were shy, like girls who were shy, girls who never wanted to go to high school are now going to high school and topping their schools, you're given reason to keep going. When you see people agitating because their forests are being mutilated, when people start demanding better, you are inspired and you have a reason to keep going. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm sure so many of our viewers are so inspired right now. It's not an easy journey. Any choice to work in the social work field is definitely not an easy part. You need to be strong. You need to have a heart. I would like to pick up on one statement you made when the government imposed a ban on forest, and the community came to you and said, you've taken away our livelihood. Now, I've seen a lot of instances where education can do this. For example, you have a village, you have beauty, you have traditions, you have the elderly who bring all the olden traditions, it's beautiful, it's harmony. But then you have the younger generation who go to study, they go abroad for their education, they've got degrees, and then they come back and they change everything. So it's sort of a pro and con happening here, because yes, I want my child to be educated, but that same child will come back and destroy the community, saying you can't follow these traditions anymore. We need skyscrapers and we need bridges and we need fast trains. And so is it that we are giving up our past for the future?
I think that's a very, very, very good question. So allow me to be very honest with you and say that I also want to hold on to certain beliefs and traditions that my people practice. But I also don't want them to be left behind. I want them to be part of development. And so the question is, how do we coexist? How do we retain the things that we believe in? How do we, for instance, protect nature? And I watch a lot of documentaries and I've seen people building wonderful houses without destroying the state of our environment. So we really have to find a space where we can coexist, because as a daughter of my village, I want the best for them. I have had the privilege of traveling a bit. I have seen the best. I want to see children in my village coding. I want to see them producing robots. I want to see them using virtual reality. These are things I want them to understand AI, because this is really the future and AI is all over around us. So how can they become producers? And I also want them to maintain the communal sense that we've grown up with. I don't want them to lose that. I don't want them to just become people who are always on their phones and gaming. I still want them to play outside. And this is where, again, the role of policy comes in. How do we come up with policies that are ensuring that they protect what is dear to us and what is meaningful to us? And even when they bring in, for instance, investors from outside, or when they allow people to come in, when they bring in foreign apps, how do we ensure that our people are actually benefiting and not suffering? How do we ensure that, for instance, taxes, if it's an international company, I'm not sure whether I will be sued for giving an example, but imagine a company like Uber. How do we tax a company like Uber? It's making a lot of money from, say, Kenya. But how do we ensure that A, our drivers are protected, and B, the government and the citizens are also benefiting, because they're making a lot of money from us? And these are some of the conversations that we need to have. Because yes, the old taxis in Kenya, for instance, want to hold on to the old taxis. But then this is the future. I don't want, for instance, when I use the Airbnb, I don't want to use the old hotel. It's too expensive for me. I want to travel and use Airbnb, and it allows me to meet new people. But then the hotel industry, they also need to think about changing. But how do we ensure that we're protecting them from these foreign businesses as well? So it's a combination of both. Yes, we retain what is good, but that doesn't mean that we don't move with the time.
Okay, so if I've understood correctly, what you're saying is we need to somehow maintain a balance. We need the best of both worlds, yes, past and future. And from my point of view, the only way we can achieve this is not simply through education, but responsible education, the correct education. Am I right?
Yes, yes. Education that does not erode our brains, education that does not change who we are. For instance, I'm Black. It's not education that tells me a white person is better than a Black person, or education that comes and tells me, oh, you need to stop learning your history and just focus on the Western history, because my history is valid. You get? So that kind of education is bad. I want to see. I'm a believer of virtual reality because I think it's something powerful, especially in storytelling, because I love storytelling. But I don't want to see the Western stories. I want to see my stories. I want to see. I want the fight for independence recreated, so that my children, my unborn children, will know that there were people who went to forests, risked their lives, and fought for our land. So that for me is the kind of fusion that I'm looking for. That's the kind of education we need to teach our children, to love, to tell our stories, to love ourselves. In as much as we are being forward thinking, we must not lose ourselves.
Beautiful. As much as we are being forward thinking, we should not lose ourselves. I just had to repeat that last statement of yours. It was perfect, to the point. So we have already so many audience questions come in. Let me take up some of them. I'm sure they are waiting for their answers. Saish Kunkolkar has asked, how do I take my passion and make it into a career?
Yeah.
And I like this question because he's not talking about passion. He's talking about his passion.
Yeah. So the honest truth is that it's taken me, I've been doing this for now 10 years. And I did a lot of this work for free. I did not even need payment. I would at times get money from my pocket and actually do this. And then I would also call my friends and do this together. But the more I do it, the more I build a story, the more I can come to a corporate in my country and say, see what I'm doing. Give me a chance and I will do the same for you. For instance, when it comes to CSR, give me a chance with your CSR and let me create impact for you. Let me impact these communities for you, because I think there is there is some synergy. So it takes time. It's not something that you will wake up one morning and it's there, but start small. I will not lie to you that start it on its own unless you have a family that's supporting you, unless you have another source of income or you're comfortable. Just start it as a side hustle and build on it as you go along until it gets to a point where it can stand on its own. But if you have support, and I don't know whether there are people who are in school here, one of the things that I wish I did when I was in university, because I had a lot of time, is start my passion, start on the things that I love. Because somebody is paying my food, is giving me money for food, is paying my hostel, is paying my school fees, and I have a lot of time on my hands. So whatever it is I want to achieve, I want to become, and of course at that time you're not even aware, but just start, try things out, fail and start again, because you have the advantage of time. But passion, and then for passion to start earning, it takes time. But there are people who are privileged. There are people who have the money, they can try these things out. But for those of us who have really had to work extremely hard, I would also encourage you to take it with caution. Work for an organization that makes you happy, that aligns with your passion, and grow with it as you also do your own things. Learn how business is done, for instance, and eventually you'll be there. So it's not something that you wake up one morning and it's there. No, it takes time to grow.
It takes time. So what you're saying is you start, so you show people what you can do, because it is your passion, you're going to do it well. And once society sees that you're good at it, people will call you. And then it becomes a career.
So let me say something else. We have a Swahili saying that goes, mkono mtupu haulambwi. Like, I cannot lick an empty hand. There has to be something. So if you're coming to me to partner with you, I need to see, especially in this world where money is hard to come by and then there are so many fraudsters, I need to see that you've at least done something. We have one of the libraries funded by the leading telco in Kenya, but it is the work that we had done that convinced them to give us that money. But how do you do this as a young person? For me, the Global Shapers community, these were like-minded people. Let me tell you, I used to go for mentorship projects, and I would tell them to pay to fuel the cars, carry their own laptops. Then we would get there in the schools that we are collaborating with, because you can never walk alone. There's a good saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So don't think that you can achieve anything alone. So the school we would be going to that would be hosting us, maybe will cook us lunch. It may be basic lunch, but we will share it with the teachers and the students and the parents. And it will be such a joyous moment. So with the little that we had, we were able to start, because done is better than perfect. And then we use the same, because again, documenting the work that you've done is extremely important. So we would take sorry, I was just reading some of the messages that are coming in. So we would take then those photos and videos and go with them to potential partners and see, on our own, we've been able to achieve A, B, C, and D, but if you came in and helped us, we would be able to get to the next level.
Okay, lovely. Now I have another question from the audience member, Zakaria Odawa.
He's a shaper from Kakuma Hub.
Oh, excellent. Another shaper. Welcome, welcome. So they ask, how can we ensure the inclusion of vulnerable social groups such as refugees, asylum seekers? How do we make sure that these students get access to quality and equitable education in the context such as refugee camps, which is usually ostracized from society?
Yes. So Zakaria is a global shaper in the first hub in a refugee camp. It's called Kakuma Hub in Kenya. I'm so happy that you came, Zakaria, to cheer me on. I celebrate you, my brother. And that's a very, very valid question in terms of leaving no one behind. And one of the things, and I said this before, one of the things that we must work on is on our policies. How do we ensure that, because we are all a crisis away from becoming a refugee. And when I say a crisis away from becoming a refugee, I mean even climate change crisis. you find that there are countries that are going to disappear, for instance. Where will those people go? They will become refugees. So it doesn't have to be war. It can be anything, a natural calamity that happens. And it displaces you as a human being. So everything that we do, we who have the privilege, we who are in our countries and we have access to power, is fight for people who have no power. Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. When I cut my hand and you cut yourself, blood comes out. Not milk, not gold, not money, blood, red blood that has similar components. So we who are privileged, and I go back again to Global Shapers and other such networks, because I know there are other people who are not global shapers, and other such networks, we must be the voice of the voiceless, and that's why we exist. And I love the theme or the tagline of the World Economic Forum. It's making the world a better place. So how can we make the world a better place? How can we use what is in our hands to make the world a better place? So our policies must ensure that everybody is included, whether you're an asylum seeker, whether you are a refugee. And of course, it's going to take a lot of work. And allow me to paint the picture for you. I am, for instance, Kakuma Hub is in a place called Turkana, which is a county. And even the people in that particular county are some of the poorest in my country. And so you're telling them that foreigners are coming here and they're going to be assimilated into this community. Of course, they will be very, very uncomfortable. And you find that politicians who ought to be educating their citizenry, they're using it because they fear this will affect their results, election results. So it's a very, very delicate matter. And that is why I'm saying our fellow youth, we the youth who know better, have to stand in the gap and speak the truth and educate the masses on what's the right thing to do. And at the back of our minds, we must remember that we are all human beings and we are a crisis away from becoming a vulnerable community. So policy is extremely important because then policy protects everybody. If we have policies in place that say every person in this country, every person in India, every person in Kenya has access to education. And look at this way. For me, I see the refugee community, for instance, as an untapped workforce, untapped consumers of the products that you're producing, untapped markets as well, untapped brain that could come and improve our society. Okay, so if we have inclusive policies where we are not suspicious and afraid of our fellow human beings, and we must be the ambassadors of this message, because at the end of the day, white, black, blue, yellow, at the end of the day, we are all just human beings. And what makes a refugee any less than you? We, very privileged people who forget that really, it's not that they want to be here, it's just that circumstances have forced them to be here. So we must become the voices of the voiceless. We have converged together and we must use that convergence to now demand better. First, educate the masses and tell them you don't have to fear a fellow human being, because the truth is we are all human beings. Secondly, we are all a crisis away from being vulnerable. And second of all, but importantly, is that we must remind them that you know, having these people here is not a threat. They're not here to take your jobs because you are not taking it anyway. You also need to, we can all coexist and create more spaces that accommodate more people. And I think one of the countries that has done very, very well is Uganda, where they're even given land. Another country is Ghana. So these are countries that I would encourage the people who are following this conversation, should they be interested in knowing about refugees, these are countries that they can study. Yeah.
Okay. So in India, I just wanted to give a follow-up question to this question. In India, we have a reservation system for different castes, tribes, and backward classes of, traditionally speaking. Would it be advisable to have reserved seats for refugee students in, say, the nearby schools?
It should be, but then it should not be, what is it called? It's not a favor. You're not doing them a favor. It ought to be a right. And like I said, you know, if it's a favor, maybe I am president today and I care about refugees, I care about the communities that have been left out, I will say that let's include them, let them go to school, let's have reserved seats for them. But somebody else comes in and they don't care about it, and it's kicked out. So the reason as to why having these things are as low is that they protect them. They protect the vulnerable communities. And anytime you want to change the constitution, it's a very lengthy process. So it needs, for me, I'm going to stress the need for policy, because without policy, there's nothing we are doing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Jafar Khan seems to be quite taken up with you. He admires you, and he asks, what is the aim of your organization?
Thank you very, very much. I do a lot of work in climate change, and I really, really care about climate action. But my focus in climate action, I'm going to use the words that I used earlier. Somebody, the community was happy, but then I remember my village elders asking me, okay, so what you're doing is very good, but what's the alternative? You've taken away our only source of income, but you've not given us an alternative. And it made a lot of sense, because if this is the only way I know how to earn a living, to take my children to school, to give them food, then you take that away. I don't care whether you're saving the environment. Climate action has to have people at the center of it for it to make sense. So we must start thinking of what's the alternative? What's the alternative source of income? So we do people-centered, human-centered forest restorations with livelihoods at the back of our minds. I also run a for-profit company where I do impact reporting and digital advertising as well. This is for development partners, for NGOs and governments as well. But I've done a lot of work in education, yes.
Of course, right. So Dia Nandi has another question. She asks, how can we achieve success, which in itself is such a wide topic, success. How do we achieve success, and how do we decide our future goals?
Success is such a big word, because it's quite different for everybody. My success is not your success. But for me, success is how many people have I impacted? Have I touched a life? Have I made somebody, like, this year, 2020, we had set such high goals that we wanted to achieve, but all those have gone to waste. And it got to a point and made me realize, what are the things that truly matter? Is it the amount of money in my bank, or is it the number of people that I can really say that I'm supporting? For instance, families that have been disrupted. I have a lady who cleans for me, and she fell so sick in April, so sick that she could have died. And it also exposed the loopholes in our health system, because if you want access to good healthcare, it's extremely expensive. And if you don't have insurance, you will have to pay that money. And I was just looking at her and thinking to myself, if this woman didn't have me, she would have probably died. But that's not how it ought to be. So for me, success for everybody is totally different. And maybe today I want to go there, I will go there, and I'll see, I can actually go to the next level. So success is very different for everybody. But then I've also learned to count small steps, to celebrate small steps. If I move from A to B, I will celebrate. I will look back and celebrate, because at times you need that you feel like you're mark timing. But the fact that maybe you are not able, and allow me to also dwell on mental health, maybe you didn't leave your bed yesterday, but today you left your bed and you took a shower, that's reason enough to celebrate. There is so much pressure on us to be successful, which I think is really useless. We need to pause and ask ourselves, what really matters? And COVID has reminded us that nobody is immune. We are seeing big people catching COVID and some unfortunately dying. So what are the things that truly matter? And the other thing is that we are all on our individual path. So some of us will get there first, others will take time. I always say I'm a late bloomer, and that's okay. So I will not look at you and say, oh my God, my life is so bad. I'm doing so badly in life. This one has, and you don't even know what mechanisms they use. Maybe they come from a good family, but they're very connected. So let us learn to just celebrate small steps, understand that we are all in our individual journey. It may take time, but we will get there. And it's quite interesting, because just a few weeks ago, I was approached to do something that did not agree with me, but it was something that I didn't agree with, and it was something that was going to make me a lot of money. And I remember one of my mentors telling me, Wanjuhi, we will get to where we want to go. That's a fact. As long as we remain true to ourselves first, and true to society, because there are people who look up to us as well. But even before you go to society, true to yourself. Does this thing, do you agree with this thing? Does it align with your ethos and what you believe in? And those words really hit me hard, because once we work hard and we remain true to ourselves and focusing, keeping our eyes focused on the goal, and remembering that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, it takes time. So I wouldn't want to say success is A or B or C or D. For me, waking up every morning, if I wanted to wake up at 4 a.m. and I wake up at 4 a.m., that's success. And that gives me reason to actually work very hard and achieve something else. And then I will go home singing and dancing. I will dance in the shower. And then tomorrow morning, I will even have more reason to. So success is different. So what do you want to achieve? Is it making a nice meal? I have a nice meal. That's reason to be happy. So we need to really redefine success. You're on mute.
Sorry. Lovely. I was saying lovely. There's some people phoning in my background, so I muted myself. Okay. So Veloisa Mashkaresh, who is actually she comes for a lot of our talks. I'm so happy to have her here. Veloisa asks, when we only focus on the digital aspect of education and we give up on the traditional methods of teaching, would it not affect the overall growth of the student, especially the emotional part?
Yeah, I think that it's important to clarify that it has to be both. It cannot just be technology. But unfortunately, times are changing, and in as much as we would want to hold on to the traditions, I don't think it will be possible. One good example is life is becoming very, very expensive, and this is everywhere in the world. You find that people have to take maybe more than one job. So what happens, And this really, really affects the decision I make as a woman, because I want to give my children the best, but I'm probably not there to pick them up in the morning and take them to school, and take them from school to home every day. So the reality and the truth of the matter is that times are changing and we need to change with them. But I grew up in the village, and it takes a village to raise a child. So how can communities contribute to giving children access to people, fun, and games as well, so that the child is not just staying in the house, but they are also going out to play? So I think I believe in capitalism, but I believe in capitalism that's social capitalism. That I think about you, I think about my neighbor's well-being as well. And if something I will do will harm my neighbor, then, we always say that your rights end where mine begin. So if there's a teacher, say in this community, is the community willing to remunerate her so that she can meet maybe 10 students at a day? So we need to also rethink. So it's a fusion of both, but we can't say that we're not going to adopt to the digital learning because we want to hold on. It may not be practical, to be honest. It may not be practical. And imagine in a pandemic like this, are you going to expose your child to COVID? No, because the truth is that it's a risky world out there. So we cannot stick and hold on to it, but we need to find ways of still marrying the two together.
Absolutely. Like what you said earlier, we move to the future while kind of trying to maintain a balance. So we have a question from Zephyr Pinto, who's actually my mother. I'm so happy. So she asked, being from a management background, because we were researching you and we know that you studied management, what inspired you to take up education? I know you've already spoken about this, but that was as a child. So why would you go to study management and then take up education?
So, and hello, Mama. Thank you very much for joining. Don't we all have our mothers for being our cheerleaders? So thank you very much. But I wouldn't say I took up education. I am very action-oriented, and when I identify a gap, I will still find myself walking towards it, and I want to fill that particular gap. And that was it for me in education. The reason as to why I ventured into education and I was doing this as my way of giving back to society was because I am here today. You're listening to me because I went to university, I gained an education. And my parents really sacrificed to ensure that all my siblings and I got education. And the only time we fought with my father was when we didn't perform well. And so every single day I have the desire in my heart to see every child go to school. So that's what inspired me to go back and still do a lot of work in education. I'm also, fun fact, I'm also a daughter of a teacher. My mother is a primary school teacher. She still is, and she loves teaching. She's a mother to many. And I think I'm still a teacher at heart. I still find myself, even what I do every single day, I still go back and teach. And not necessarily classroom teaching, but even mentorship, even managerial skills, for instance. But yes, I would say it was my way of saying thank you to my community, because my community has really contributed to making me who I am today. And the gap that I identified, that I could feel at the moment, at that time, was education, because I wanted to see many more children from my village, for instance, going to school, getting a degree, because we'll come back and invest. And I used to tell, it wasn't easy as well, because the parents were not invested in their children. And I remember telling them, because I started where I'm known, and I would tell them, you have a quarter acre of land, you have 4 sons, subdivide that land with your 4 sons, what will make them not kill you? But take them to school, educate them, and they will buy you more land. So that made sense to them, you know? So it was my way of saying thank you to my community. It was the thing that I realized that if we addressed education, then truly we'll have a generation, we'll have a better village. We will have better roads, because this will become future engineers, for instance. Yeah.
Lovely. So you get educated to come back and help your society, which is the reason we started education in the first place. Shalene Farrell has an extremely interesting question. She asks, as teachers of today, a lot of us have moved on to be more progressive, forward-thinking ideas, but still a lot of parents are used to the old school thought process, and they object and they demand that we go back to the way they were taught in their school. So how do you combat that as a teacher?
Yeah, so I'm learning, or have learned, that at times we use force, but other times we use diplomacy. And a good example is what I told you about land, telling this, because this is what they know. So they hold on to land, they always want to farm. You tell them, they're invited by the teacher to school for a parents meeting, and they say, oh, today I was on the farm, so I wasn't able to make it. And so you bring it to their level. So when it comes to education, and I love it, and you know, you do this with humility, with a lot of humility, with a lot of respect. And I would say to them, so a few years ago, let's say 20 years ago, did you have a mobile phone? And they will tell you no. And I'm just giving an example. And they will tell you, no, we didn't have a mobile phone. So why are you having it? Why are you not holding on to the past? You see, and they will see sense in what you're saying. So what is that thing they hold dear that they didn't have at the time, you know, when they are making reference to, and they have now? And bring it to their level, let them understand. Don't fight them, because these are the parents, and they have a right to demand something different, because these are their children. But you know better, you know that the future is this way, and if you don't expose your children to that, then you're losing them. So a good example is a mobile phone. If this was me, I would go to the parents and I would say, okay, so did you have a mobile phone last year? Did you have, okay, for instance, they had a Nokia, and Nokia, the 3310 was phased out. So why did you upgrade your phone? Or you ask them, when did you last upgrade your phone, and why did you upgrade it? Because it has newer features, it has better features, has a better camera. So why did you upgrade it? But you want your child not to upgrade, yet you want the latest phone. What is more important, you see? So you have to, I think when you're trying to change mindsets of people, you need a lot of wisdom. Because remember, you cannot use force. I mean, I will ignore you as well if you use force. But when you help me see the sense in what you're saying, when you bring it down to my level, then I will appreciate and I will change and I will start listening to you. So it's not a fight, it's not a war. It's actually, and it takes time. Changing mindsets takes time, but at times you use force, but not necessarily. You know, if it's a case of that the child is being exposed to harm, then you can use force. But if it's a case of changing mindsets, I would say do it with a lot of love and wisdom. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the parent and the teacher both want the same thing, the best for the child. So diplomacy should be the best solution. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So Akshada Gurino has another question. Oh, before Akshada, Shalene Farrell has replied, that's a great idea. Thanks so much. She's very happy. Thank you. Now, Akshada Gurino's question is, with the pandemic and the shift in traditional classroom settings, how do you aim to provide education to the rural areas where technology hasn't made progress? Now, it has made a lot of progress because of the pandemic, but like you said, there are still those areas where they have not got technology? How do we reach them?
And we addressed this when I said internet needs to become a human right.
Yes,
and we need to
yes,
push
it
for
does.
it. Because when it becomes a human right, government will be forced to ensure that there is connectivity in every village, in every country. So that means investing in infrastructure, investing in connectivity, investing even in the gadgets that allow the students to access technology. Unless it becomes policy, it will always become a favor. They will always think that they're doing you a favor, yet they're not doing you a favor. So for me, I think one of the things that organizations and groups and young people really must advocate for is to have internet. But when we get the internet connectivity, when it becomes a right, let's use it for the betterment of ourselves and our community and our countries. We must be patriotic as well.
So the good thing about the Indian government is they are in the process of ensuring internet to every village in India. And if I may speak about my own state, Goa, where we are right now, I know of a lot of villages where the privileged part of society, they've actually sponsored smartphones for students who just cannot afford it. And not only that, they've ensured that there is an Ethernet connection, there's Wi-Fi, and these kids can attend their classes because of the more privileged sections of society. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful. That's the way society should.
These stories need to be told. These stories need to be highlighted so that when I'm just an onlooker, if I'm Googling about India and I see that, I will also A, copy that and try to implement it in my own country. But B, you are actually encouraging them to keep doing what they're doing. So we rarely tell these stories. Even government needs to be celebrated. When government does something good, we don't just speak when government is doing bad things, but we also celebrate when government does good things.
Yes.
And we need to lead by example, because I don't know about you, but there's so much mistrust in my country when it comes to government. There's such a big divide between government and the citizens. And at times you forget that they're actually good public servants who are committed to the betterment of our countries.
It's true. So Neha Doshi has another question she just posted. How can schools implement everyday skills in learners like electrician work, plumbing from a young age? Because we know we have this vocational stream when they grow older, but from a young age, particularly when the education boards usually demand examinations, rote learning, by heart, and spit it out onto the exam paper.
Yeah, and I like these questions because this is what we just talked about. We need to start by identifying the gap. And for me, I would really want us to start, like in Kenya, I would want us to start teaching coding. It needs to become the law. We need to start teaching coding to kids when they are as young as 5. I mean, I watch documentaries on Japan and I see kids making robots as early as 5, and I'm like, I haven't even made a robot. I've only seen a robot thanks to the World Economic Forum. Otherwise, I've never have seen a robot in my own life. And how many of us are there? So we need to start early, and I agree with you totally. But unless we start having these conversations and hosting the right people, the people who actually make it happen, because at times we also don't know that this is something that can be done, and not just highlighting it as something that can be done, but also highlighting how it can be done. Because you don't just say we need internet, we need this to happen. How do we do it? What are the things that are required? How do we get there? We are at 0, how do we get to 1? And then from 1, we'll figure out how to get to 2. So it's not just highlighting the problem, but also giving solutions. But I would encourage hubs in India to create a platform that allows for dialogues between decision makers and young people. So because at the end of the day, we know we have exposure, we've seen what is better, and we can actually talk to leadership in government. And we also need other people who are putting pressure and saying we need, but we also need to step in the gap. And I think the future belongs to those who are also saying, how do we move from A to B?
I think to summarize most of the questions that were asked today, it all comes down to policy. It all comes down to making a permanent change, something that will be continued for generations to come. Now, here's just a slightly different question, which does not rely on policy. It's from the parents' point of view. The pandemic has, Savia D'Souza is the person who's asked this question. She says, the pandemic has forced us to have online classes. Now, children have lost the opportunity to learn more than they could have if they were in school with their peers. They've lost that interaction. What are your thoughts on this?
Dear parents, is your child alive? Is your child healthy? Have you protected your child from COVID? We are putting, at times I look at parents and I wonder, I'm not a parent, but I have nephews and I really love them and I care for them. I have 6 nephews and I think 1 niece. And I really care deeply for them. And I would not imagine them being exposed to COVID-19. Yeah. My mother, like I said, is a teacher and I care about her and I would not want her exposed to COVID-19. And she has pre-existing conditions. So what is more important, education or the health and safety of your children and the teachers? People have enough time to still continue learning when COVID is over. So what is our priority? Is it health? Is it the human being or education? I mean, if these teachers catch COVID-19, who is going to teach our children?
Absolutely. What a lovely way. Wanjuhi, I thank you for all your answers. I think we've reached to the end of the audience questions. We've spoken about the resetting of the globe, what we need to do. So I'm going to combine my last 2 questions into one. How do you think and what would you advise the young people, not the global shapers, but everyday young people to contribute to this amazing task of the Great Reset? How do they do that?
So the first thing I will say is being patriotic. One of the things that we must do is become patriotic. We must learn to love ourselves, So the first thing we must do even before we think about patriotism is taking care of yourself. Because if you're not whole, you can never divide yourself into half. I care a lot about mental health, and I think we as young people are really, really suffering. But I wish we just breathe in, breathe out, go for a walk. When you're not okay, raise your hand and say, I'm not okay. So that's the first thing that we need, because we need to be whole so that we can be able to subdivide ourselves into halves and allow other people to now enjoy our wholeness. The second thing that we must do is love our countries. We must learn to be patriotic, because when you're patriotic, first, you will not give a bribe, you will not take a bribe. You will call out the negative things that are happening in your country. You will be the first person to volunteer. You will raise your hand and say, I want to help. I want to help make my country better. So you will stand on the right side of history. It's a painful decision to make. Like I said, I had been offered an exciting opportunity that would have made me a millionaire or maybe a billionaire. But then, we have to question ourselves and ask, am I being true to myself first, and am I being true to my society? Thirdly, what are your skill sets? What do you have holding in your hands, and how can we use it to help us think through the Great Reset? How does our future look like? How do we move forward? I think volunteerism is extremely important, but then there is a thin line between volunteerism and being taken advantage of. So let us know the difference. But then I will challenge young people from all over the world who are following this conversation today, that we have something in us that can help make the world a better place, and we know we do. If you feel that even just smiling is all you need, then that's extremely important. Smile as much as possible. Say hi to as much as possible. If you feel that you are good at formulating policy, allow me to go back to policy again. Help. If you feel that you have ICT skills and you have extra time, go to a village that doesn't have ICT and teach for free. If you can mobilize resources and set up an ICT center, a library, do it. So what is it that you're holding in your hands? What ideas do you have? Start blogging, use social media. You find that some young people have such huge following on social media. Use it to start conversations that are meaningful, conversations that will help us make the world a better place. So what are you holding in your hands as a young person that you can use to propel yourself and also make the world a better place?
Beautiful way to end this fantastic final answer. I would just like to give a small message to all our listeners, particularly the young people out there. Do not be scared. A lot of us want to change the world. A lot of us don't know how. We don't know whom to contact. And then there's always the lingering fear in the background. What will they think? What will they say to me? What if I mess up? Mess up! Make a mess! Make some mistakes, break some bones. How else will you learn? but because none of us are born with the tagline president, none of us. But you get to become the president because you know your community, you love your community, you want to do something with your community. And if you're lucky and fortunate and brilliant enough, you might even reach up to the level of Wanjuhi at such a young age that I'm still so amazed by all that she's accomplished in her age. This is an example to all the youth out there. It's amazing. You just need hard work. Nobody gets anywhere by sitting at home watching TV or playing PUBG. I'm sorry, but you don't. And I wanted to say that. Hard work, dedication, a passion, and a will to do things, and courage. You just need courage. There's nothing more powerful on this planet than courage and confidence. If Wanjuhi has anything else to add.
I think I really love what you said. I think that's a very, very beautiful way of ending. Please remember that we cannot change the world in a day. It takes time. So when you feel you're exhausted, take time out. And also don't do it alone. Do it together. I always say I have paid the price and I continue to pay the price. It's not something that I have achieved in a day. I have made mistakes as well. And it's okay to make mistakes, because from those mistakes, yes, at times I feel so bad, but I learn, I pick myself up and I keep going. So what's my secret? I keep my eyes fixed on the goal. That is where I'm going. I will be oblivious of everything else. That's where I'm going. I silence the noise because there's always a noise. So I'm going to silence that noise and I will keep my eyes fixed on the goal. And then finally, you are the ones we've been waiting for. So let's do it. And join the Global Shapers community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Wanjuhi, for joining us and for giving us such inspirational words and experiences and thoughts. The messages are just pouring in. People are so grateful. People are so inspired. If anybody would like to contact Wanjuhi after that, feel free. You can contact her through us, the Panjim Hub, or you can even go on Instagram. I'm sure she is, if she doesn't mind. On Instagram, you can contact her directly.
Yes. Wanjuhi Njoroge on Twitter at iWanjuhi. On Twitter
there you have
at iWanjuhi.
An extremely brilliant person, extremely humble and approachable person. She will be more than happy to help anyone who would like it. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Please do join us next month. We have 2 sessions, an amazing speaker. Again, the details will be out soon. Also, a special treat on the 26th of January. We're going to have amazing children of the world, 10 of the most inspirational children who have changed their society at such a young age are going to come together on the 26th of Jan. It will be a treat for anyone who's interested in listening to them. Thank you all very much. We'll see you soon next month. Thank you to Wanjuhi and my team for having a fantastic event. Wish you all a very good night. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye. See you.